Halloween is one of my favorite times of year, where all the ghouls and spooks run the streets. Today, these subscribers are sharing their creepiest happenings on Halloween in the month of October. If you have a story that you'd like to hear in a future video on this channel, be sure to send it to the email or the website that you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your tales of terror with everyone else here in the swamp. Welcome to Swamptober. We have a whole month of freaking scary stuff coming for you. So, let's get into these tales that will freak you out. This happened when I was 16 years old. I'm 25 now, so I'll do my best to get the whole story down for you guys. It was Halloween in my small South Louisiana town. It was a crisp night in the mid-80s, and the heat showed no signs of slacking off. I was walking around with my older sister and our friend Brooke. My sister had gone as a cat, and Brooke had gone as a witch. I made the awful decision of wearing a formal gown, since I decided to go as a zombie prom queen. I had a crown and everything. I was drowning in that dress though. I was so hot, and the corset's back was restricting my breathing. It was about 8:40 p.m., and all the kids were pretty much cleared out of the streets. We were making our way to the park next to the city hall where my mother was supposed to pick us up. We were supposed to be there for 9 p.m. The three of us were about 6 blocks away at this point, and my sister had stopped to talk to a friend of hers. I was not stopping though. It was close to time for my mom to pick us up, and I was not going to be late. Also, I was miserable in that stupid dress, and I wanted to go home. I had carried on for about 2 blocks down before I noticed that my sister and my friend both stayed behind. I was annoyed to say the least. I only have 4 blocks to go before I could lay down in my mother's minivan. Being alone in the dark was starting to give me the creeps. The yellow streetlights didn't do much in the ambience in my favor. I'd kept my pace and kept walking, until I heard the rumble of a muffler coming up behind me. I moved all the way off the road. The large black truck came past very quickly and turned to the left in front of me. I passed the intersection, and I only had 3 blocks left to go. Then I heard the truck again. I'd never moved back onto the road, so I didn't bother looking back. It wasn't too strange that the same truck had passed again. The third time they passed, they slowed for a good 30 seconds or so. That is what scared me. I didn't recognize the truck, and the windows were tinted heavily. As soon as I thought I could see a bit of face, they peeled out and disappeared around the corner. I made another block before I heard the truck again. I was 2 blocks away from my ride, and I was scared to start running. I already couldn't breathe because of the dress, and I was terrified I would pass out. As soon as I heard the truck, my stomach wrenched. I still kept walking, only a bit faster this time. I kept my eyes down and watched my own shadow as the headlights came closer. I heard the brakes, and I made the decision to run. But I was too late. I realized how close they were to me. I felt a sharp pain on the back of my head, and I looked up the best I could see, an arm sticking out the window. An eagle clutching a sword was tattooed on his upper forearm. He had my hair wrapped around his fist. Before I could really comprehend the situation, he pumped the gas and was dragging me along the side of his truck. I was running as best as I could, clawing at his arm. I was crying and screaming. The only thing that kept running through my mind is that if I tripped, I was going to be run over. This man was just laughing. I was completely helpless. As soon as it started, he let me go. I fell to my knees on the asphalt. I tore my dress, skinned my palms, and my scalp was on fire. I was inconsolable, and I was hyperventilating. I stood up, wiped my face, and then I looked around and felt absolutely violated. I looked back at the way I had come from and realized that this man had dragged me by my hair for a whole block and a half. Once I caught my head, I ran across the street to the park. My mother was nowhere to be seen. I climbed into the enclosed slide and just curled up and cried. I don't know how long I was laying there before I heard my mother calling my name. I came out and she was walking up the street calling me. I walked over to her and looked up and down, and she started freaking out. Apparently I had blood on my face and dress and my hands. She ran to me and asked what happened, and kept looking up and down all over me. She looked for a gash, but she couldn't find anything. I couldn't find my voice, and I just held on to her and cried. We spent the next few hours at the police station filling out a report. Long story short, nothing ever came of it. My sister got in trouble with my parents for not being at the city hall on time. She was grounded. My mother had actually left City Hall to go look for us. She found my sister where I left her, and my sister hadn't even realized that I hadn't stayed. I got into trouble for not staying with my sister, but I didn't get grounded. I'm still mad that the dress was ruined, and I lost the damned crown. I'm even angrier that the man was never caught. This Halloween, I will be out with my godchild trick-or-treating. It'll be the first one that I've gone out for in the 9 years since this has happened. This happened last year when I was 15. Me and my friend, I'll call her Kate, were messing around in our neighborhood one day. We were on the side of the road, playing around with sparkles and other stuff like that. Suddenly, Kate said to turn around and look behind me. I did, and when I looked at home behind us, I saw someone looking through the window. I couldn't really tell what he looked like, so I just ignored it and turned around. A few minutes later, Kate said to look again. I did, but this time there was a woman with him at the window. They were just staring at us, and I began to feel a little bit uneasy. But again, I turned around and ignored them. As the sun went down, I walked back to the house, which was across the street, and Kate went to hers, which was a few blocks away. A couple of hours later, at around 10, my phone lit up. I was watching Orange is the New Black, so at first I ignored it. Then I got another alert, so I picked up my phone and looked at the screen. My 2 alerts were Snapchat. Someone added me, and their username was something like Jaden, with a few random letters behind it. They sent me a picture. I waited until the episode was over to open it. It was a black screen with a message saying, "Hey." I ignored that message. Around 6 to 7 minutes later, I got another Snapchat from the same guy, and this time it was a black screen saying, "Why didn't you answer?" Again, I ignored the snap and went back to Netflix. When my phone buzzed again, I didn't look at it. Throughout the entire episode, I got around 4 more alerts, which I all ignored. Then, I fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I had around 11 alerts, all from the same user. Most of them were black screens saying, "Why aren't you answering?" or "I know you're awake, answer me." But the last one really freaked me out. It was a picture of my house, taken from across the street, with a caption, "Answer me now!" I was stupid, so I didn't screenshot the pictures, but I did block him. I didn't hear anything for a few more days, but then I got another alert that someone added me. It was the same usernames as before, but with like a few different numbers after it. Then I got sent multiple snaps. I didn't open any of them because I was in class. 4 hours later, I checked my Snapchat. All the pictures he sent were pictures of me. Somewhere, somehow, during lunch, he had gotten some pictures of me. He somehow got some of me when I was walking home from school as well. Again, I blocked the user, but I didn't get any screenshots. Last night I got a snap of my window, again, taken from across the street and from the same user, but this time with a 2 after it instead of a 1. I told my dad and he freaked out and called the police. When they arrived, I told them everything, but they couldn't do anything, since I didn't get any screenshots. I don't know what to do. I've deleted Snapchat, but he seems to have found me on other social medias. I blocked him on everything, and I'm thinking I'm just going to delete everything as well. But how can I stop him from just making more and more accounts? If anybody has any advice, I'd love to hear it. Way back in 2000, I was a bored 15-year-old girl and began exploring AOL chat rooms. I had recently left public school and moved to a new city that I'd never been before. So I was a bit lonely. I thought it would be cool if I could link up with people around my age in my new area. I've always been very cautious with my personal info, so I wasn't too worried about anything bad happening. I ended up meeting my boyfriend through one of those chat rooms. Things moved quickly, and I was soon pregnant and engaged. We got our own place. Life was good, and we still used AIM to message each other when he was at work, and frequently, we would also chat with our friends in the chat rooms. Some of my old online contacts would message me from time to time, but honestly, I mainly chatted with people I knew IRL. When our son was about 6 months old, we moved into a larger apartment. My fiance Jake began working long shifts, and so I was home alone a lot with the baby. One evening, I was in a chat with a friend when someone else sent me an AIM. I wasn't sure who it was, but she began casually chatting with me, and it seemed remotely normal. At first. I was still confused as to who this was, and so she sent a photo. She didn't look familiar. I continued the conversation because I started to think maybe my fiance and a friend were just messing with me because he liked to joke around a lot. He was a bit of a dull, awkward conversation, and my refusing to allow them to view my webcam. This person sends me a photo of a middle-aged man. Confused, I asked who it was, and why they sent it. They gave me some line like, "Oh, that's my friend John. Don't you think he's handsome?" I immediately knew that this wasn't right or a joke from anyone I knew. It was clear I'd been messaged by this guy all along, pretending to be another teenaged girl. I initially cut off contact, but after a couple of days of thought, I was just creeped out and actually called and canceled my entire AOL service. A week or so after this, my brother-in-law Mark and his wife Lynn moved in with us. It was early evening on a Friday, and Mark and Lynn and I were getting some food and drinks before Jake got home. I was in the kitchen, and Mark was just a few feet away in the living room with Lynn. We were chatting and laughing when the phone rang. I answered it. It was a man. He greeted me by my first name in a very creepy tone, and seemed to be keeping his voice low. I had that feeling in the pit of my stomach that something was wrong. I asked, "Who is this?" Mark took notice and asked me who it was. He must have noticed the change of tone in my voice because he glanced at me and went straight into his room to pick up on the other line to listen. The man on the phone must have heard Mark because then he said, "Well, I see you have company," in a pretty disgruntled tone, and then he quickly hung up. I didn't have caller ID at the time, so we dialed star and 69 to get the number. When I called it back, it was a hotel in a neighboring city, about 15 minutes away. I asked the clerk who answered about the phone call I'd received, but they informed me that there was no way to tell who sent that phone call, unfortunately. There's just too many rooms to tell. I knew it wasn't anyone I knew. My phone line was only active for a couple of months at that point. It was listed under my name, but I'd only given it out to family and a few close friends. We didn't know who to make of it or what to make of it. But later through that week, it was just forgotten. The week came and went. I'd received a couple calls from blocked numbers where no one responded, but I tried to convince myself that I was simply worrying too much and that it was no big deal. We prepared for another weekend hanging out together. Again, Mark, Lynn, and I were home and Jake was still at work. We needed a few things from the store, so Mark volunteered to go get them while Lynn and I stayed in with the kids. Now, the small building we lived in had 3 apartments on the lower level, side by side, and 3 units above on the upper level. Kind of like a motel. Our unit was the last one to the right on the lower level and the furthest away from the parking lot. When you exit our apartment, to make your way to the parking lot, you walk down a cement walkway and past the other 2 lower apartments. When you get to the end of the building, there's an area between the deck staircase to the upper level of the building and where the bicycles are stored. This is the only residential property in the area, and the surrounding businesses and offices were closed at this time of evening. Mark exited the apartment, but came running back in just a few minutes later. He asked me if I was expecting more company. When I told him no, he told me that when he began walking past the other apartments into the lot, a man dressed in a dark clothing with a hood on had snuck out to the bicycle area and began walking towards our apartment with his head down. Once he noticed Mark coming straight towards him, he turned and ran. Mark chased him to the lot, but the guy took off into the darkness and he lost him. We all just sat nervously. That is when the man who called me, and that the man was the girl from the chat room. I just have no clue how he could have found out my number unless maybe I'd given it to someone previously, thinking that they were someone else but really it was him. I don't know how advanced people's hacking skills were back then, and if they could have found out my info through my AOL service, but I definitely regretted chatting away with my boredom. After this, we moved to an entirely different town, and I never listed a landline number ever again. A couple months back, I was up late playing video games. It was about 3:30 a.m. I had been playing for several hours at that point and started to feel restless from sitting for so long. So I decided I'd go for a walk. I lived just outside of a relatively small and quiet town in Ireland, and being a grown-ass man in my 20s, I figured I didn't have any reason to be fearing of going outside. I put on my jacket, grabbed my headphones, and started out on my usual path, following the road outside of my house and onto a bypass on the edge of town. The air was crisp and refreshing. The road was well lit from the streetlights, and it seemed like it was going to be a pleasant walk. The bypass has a footpath on one side that's on sort of a hill, so it's slightly elevated from the road. Hugging the footpath is a small wooded area that's near pitch black at night. I was looking down at my phone contemplating what song I wanted to play next, when I noticed legs of a person whom I've almost walked into. I was caught off guard, since just moments ago I'd been looking ahead of me and hadn't seen anyone at all. I glanced up to see an older man in a brown coat. He looked to be in his 70s and was a bit shorter than me with an unreadable expression on his face. He says something which I can barely hear through my headphones, but I thought I heard him saying something like, "doggy." Assuming this man was simply looking for a lost pet, I took off my headphones and said, "I haven't seen any dogs, sorry." He then repeats what he said. His voice was high-pitched and strong. I still couldn't really make out what he was saying despite my now lacking of headphones, but the final word became more clear.
"Daddy."
I asked him to repeat himself, turning my ear to hear him, leaning in slightly closer to hear him better. It was only now that I had noticed a strong petrol smell coming off of him. He breathed in sharply and spoke again. This time I was able to make out what he was saying.
Are you my daddy?"
I didn't know how to react to that. Part of me saw humor in the scenario. I'm a third his age and he's asking me if I'm his dad. The other part of me was a mixture of confusion and uneasiness. After a moment of confused silence, I said, "No, do you need help finding someone?" I really wanted to just keep walking. But what if this clearly disoriented man genuinely needed help? After another sharp inhale, he says,
"Where's my daddy?"
Still uneasy about this whole thing, I tell him I don't know and ask where he last seen whoever he is searching for. He pauses for a second, then points into the dark wooded area. I looked over to where he was pointing, but it was too dark to see anything. I start to think about how to proceed with the situation when I notice his face turn into a scowl as he grumbles something, and then he reaches into his pocket and takes out what looked like something wet rolled up in fabric. Upon closer inspection, however, I realized it was actually a small dead bird. He looks at it, grumbled again, then looks back at me. I was trying to decide if I should call someone or just go. All I knew was that I wasn't equipped to deal with this. I looked down at my phone again. Then, snap. A noise like a large twig breaking happens to my right in the wooded area, followed by a very distinct inhuman shushing noise. Every alarm in my body is going off now. I quickly say, "I don't think I can help you," and start walking fast towards the town, which turned into a full-on sprint when I hear footsteps emerging from the trees behind me. As I reach the crossing, I glance back to see a hefty bald man gilding the other guide into the trees and staring at me. The beam of a torch now piercing out from the wooded area. I cut through town and ran back home. Looking back, it's hard to say if he was in any actual danger, or if I just stumbled upon a mentally ill old guy who had to go out of his house. I checked the news for a couple days afterwards to see if anything was talking about some missing older guys in my town or something, but nothing ever came up. I haven't seen or heard anything since then. Growing up, my aunt and uncle owned a beach condo. My favorite way to spend the summer was to stay there with my family, specifically my cousin Charlie. We were absolutely inseparable growing up. There was a 1-year difference between us. The beach we stayed at was a very popular tourist beach on the South Carolina coast. So in the summer, it was incredibly busy. I mean, barely any room between you and the family next to you. Now, my family would spend all day on the beach, from about 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. The beach would stay crowded until about 5 p.m., and everyone would go back to their rooms to shower and go out to eat. So, from around 5 to 7 every day was my favorite time to be outside. We would actually have room to run wild, build sandcastles, and dig huge holes and not have to worry about people knocking them down or being too close. Around 5:30 p.m. one day, my family decided that they wanted to walk to the pier about 2 miles away, and me and Charlie begged to stay so we could build sandcastles. We were 9 and 10 at the time, and they said we could stay as long as we didn't get in the water or leave our beach spot. The condo we stayed at was 1 row back, and we were not allowed to cross the street without adults. We agreed to our terms and continued to build a row of sandcastles as they walked away. Around 5 minutes later, an extremely tall man wearing a floppy beach hat, sunglasses, with a dollop of sunscreen on his nose, came straight up to us. He started commenting on how pretty our sandcastles were, asking how long it took us to build them at high, if it was just the two of us working on them, which I clearly see what he was getting at with these questions now. We were both extremely introverted kids. We thanked him, kept our answers short, and tried to ignore him as we stood there. All of a sudden, he got really quiet, started looking around at the mostly empty beach, and he said that he had to go meet his friend. He told us to stay right there so he could bring his friend back to look at how great our sandcastles were, and walked away from us. When he got away at a safe distance, me and Charlie both looked at each other and said, "We've got to get out of here." Side note, hell yeah at us for being smart kids. We immediately started weighing our options. We knew our family wouldn't get back for at least another 30 minutes. We also knew we weren't allowed to cross the street, and quite frankly we were scared to. About 100 yards away is a tiny ramp overlooking the ocean. I believe it was a handicap access to the beach, as well as just a place to sit. We got our big shovels and decided to hollow out under the ramp pier just enough so we could crawl under and not be seen. It didn't take us long since the high tide over the years had taken out a good 3 feet of sand underneath, and our adrenaline was rushing mad fast. We took our shovels inside and crawled under. The man is still yet to be seen. I assume it took us all of 8 minutes to climb under the pier. Our heads were partially visible above the sand horizon, and we started freaking out thinking he would be able to spot us, if he looked hard enough. There were 2 boogie boards laying about 50 yards away that looked like kids had abandoned on the beach, We grabbed them and propped them up against the ramp covering the crawl space and the top of our heads from sight. Charlie curled up in a ball and cried while running scenarios by me that we were definitely going to get taken. I tried to calm down and say everything was going to be okay. Our parents would both be back soon anyway. But I definitely felt like crying myself. The whole thing felt so weird. I felt that since we both had such a bad feeling about the situation, especially at a young age, this man definitely had sinister intentions. Charlie and I peeked out of the small slits, where the boogie boards curved, and eventually saw the man walking back. Once he realized, and thankfully didn't notice us there, where we had gone, he got extremely angry, noticeably angry. He started huffing and puffing and stomping around. Then he looked at our sandcastles and kicked all of them down. We built a ton over a course of the day, and it basically had a long wall of them. And he kicked every single mound down and stormed away. We stayed under the ramp pier for about 45 more minutes until our family got back. We were too scared to say anything, because we don't think they would have believed us. We still talk about it sometimes at family gatherings or holidays. Both of us still remember. When I was in high school, some 25 years ago, I never had typical high school jobs. I worked as a mechanic's apprentice and a lot of construction odd jobs. The summer of my 10th or 11th grade year, I worked as a helper doing flooring. The job site was this older lady's house, and she was there the entire time we were doing the work. The guy I was working with would often juggle a couple job sites, so he would get things set up and usually leave me with a long task, such as tearing out the old flooring. Almost immediately, when I was there on my own, she calls over from the dining room that she thinks she is having a heart attack. It was a bit odd because she was drinking beer and smoking too. I asked her if she wanted me to call for help. She said no, but if I could help her to her room and maybe she just needed to lay down. So, I helped her to her bedroom, and she lays down on the bed. She starts to just hold on to my hand. I asked her again if there was anyone she wanted me to call. She said no, that's okay, just to stay with her a while. She asked me to lay on the bed with her. I told her no, that I need to get back to work. She said that I don't care about the work, and I want you to be here with me. After sitting there a while, she started moaning out of nowhere. She turned to me and asked me if I wanted a beer. I told her no, but if there was anything I could get for her, let me know. She said that she wanted another beer. As I go and get it for her, there was someone at the front door. He walks in and goes to her room. I go and hand her the beer, and she said this is her son. They didn't look like they were related at all. She was white and he was Hispanic. I took my chance and I left the room. Later, she is laughing, and they walk to the living room where she is bent over a pillow with her butt up in the air and only wearing panties and a long t-shirt. He grabs her private parts and turns to me and asked if I wanted to tickle her. I said no, that I need to get back to work. The next day, I am left alone now doing the demo work in the dining room. She calls me over to her bedroom, and she starts the same thing about how she thinks she is having a heart attack. This time, I'm like, is there anyone you would like me to call? She then reaches out and starts rubbing on my crotch and starts moaning. She says, why don't you take those dirty clothes off and lay down with me? I start to freak out, and I tell her that I am only 16. She didn't care, and she said, I'm going to tell your boss what you're doing. She freaks out and starts getting all weird and accusing me of looking through her things. Then, she switches to being very touchy to me. She started opening up her robe and spreading her legs and moving around like she was having an orgasm. I started to freak out a little bit, and I told her that I had to leave because I didn't want to get fired. So I walked out again. Then, after that, every time she called out for me, I just turned up the radio and acted like I didn't hear her. Later that day, her son arrived again. Now they were both in her room. When I could go throw trash outside, I could see down the hallway and see that they were having sex, loudly with the door open. Shortly after that ended, my boss came back the following day, and he was on the job site with me, thankfully.
Now looking back, I know that she wasn't an little old lady, but probably in her late 50s, but to me in high school, it seemed like she was really old.
Thanks for watching this video, guys. It's very much appreciated. If you have a story that you'd like to share, be sure to send it in to the email or the website that you can find in the description down below. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button as it helps me reach more people when you do. If you haven't yet, subscribe and turn on notifications to be sure to never miss another video. I upload almost every single day on all things creepy and anomalous. Spooktober is my favorite month of the year. Swamptober is my favorite time of the year. And here in the Dark Swamp, we love all kinds of scares. So be prepared for 30 days of creature features and all things that go bump in the night. See you guys soon with another creepy video.